Well, you made it to the end of day 5. That's a major accomplishment. And at the end of day 5, something that I'd like to do is I'd like to actually go over some examples of letters of interest. These are two samples that you can actually access through the Foundation Center's grant space. If you create a username and password, which is free as of the making of this video, so you too can access these sample letters of inquiry. Letters of inquiry can be really important, as you know from the readings from today and our discussion earlier. Really important in terms of getting the grant making organization to invite you to submit a proposal. And they can play a major role even in making it more likely that your grant will be funded than if you didn't do a letter of inquiry and were just responding to a request for proposals. So it's good to know some tricks about letters of inquiry. You've gotten some insight on the tricks from the Howlett and Bork reading and some of the other readings and videos you've watched for today. I wanted to look at these examples and point out some things to you that I think are especially important. So I've got two examples. I've got one that is written to the Blue Ridge Foundation and is looking for funding for a proposed startup called Exalt. And then there is another one that is written to the Morgan Foundation by the Entrepreneurship Preparatory School in Cleveland, Ohio. So we'll go and look at each of these. They're quite different in the way that they're organized, although you'll see some similarities. So first of all, this letter, as you can see, and I don't know how clear this is coming out on the video, but I will point out some things. It actually is broken down into sections. So this section is titled Introduction. This section is titled The Need. This section is titled How It Works and Who It Serves. And it does go on to a second page. And then it has another couple sections, a leadership section and a conclusion section. So it's very structured in the way that it is presented. And if you guys know me at all, you know that I like structure, so I'm a fan of the structure of this. If I was the foundation person reading this, I would be guided by those section headings in the letter, and it would make it, I think, easier to make a determination about whether or not this was the right fit for my foundation or not, my funding organization or not. One of the things it does do is it starts off by saying, just dear Mr. Klein, I'm submitting the following as initial inquiry for the Blue Ridge Foundation to consider a full proposal for my proposed startup, Exalt. Right off the bat, it just states what it is, and I am a fan of that. I think the more straightforward you are and the more to the point you are, the better and the more effective these letters of inquiry are. And I think this letter starts off on the right foot by just being super obvious. It then goes in this introductory section which says exactly what Exalt, the proposed startup that they're asking for money for, does. It provides a comprehensive internship program linking education, meaningful employment, and mentoring for New York City's most at-risk adolescents. And what it does is then it talks a little bit about its mission and goals. After almost a decade of managing the career exploration project I founded in blah, 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 it's time to apply my skills, experience, and passion. In other words, saying that I have experience. So it's establishing some organizational readiness as well, right up here in the introduction. Then it goes into the need statement. And this is a need statement that could be plucked almost directly from a proposal itself because it's a pretty lengthy statement. I mean, it's two paragraphs, two reasonably sized paragraphs. Also starts with a very clear sort of statistical bit of evidence. Upwards of 200,000 young adults in New York City are disconnected from the mainstream, not attending high school, and ill-prepared for work or higher education. And then there is a reference to where that comes from. That is a really important stamp on this. The only thing I think would be maybe more important is if it was giving not an upwards of an estimate, but actually saying as much as possible, if there were more direct numbers you could use. And so what it does then is it talks about the need that young adults have in terms of transitioning into work or higher education, and that what some of the problems are if they aren't transitioning, and what other organizations have started to do. Remember, we've talked about the importance of demonstrating that you know and can articulate to your funder that you know what other proposed solutions are to the problem, and then how either your idea is unique from those, or builds on those, or provides an alternative to those, or something like that. And that's what they do right here. And then it does a more specific how it works and who it serves. So looking at the activities that will be engaged in and the particular target population that will be the beneficiaries of the program, to highlight that those are the same beneficiaries that the foundation that they're looking for money from would want to serve. In terms of this leadership section, so again, it's establishing organizational readiness and reputation, and being very clear that the individual who's sending this letter of inquiry, since this is more of an individually based and individually initiated project rather than an established organization that's seeking for money, talking about experience that the individual has had with other organizations or other projects that are related to this, and talking about the network and the kinds of impact that have already been demonstrated. So that's a really good way to take a situation where there might not be a large organization with an established leadership structure behind it, and spinning it so that it demonstrates the capacity, both knowledge and skills, of the individual who's making this proposal, to say that we have the leadership to move forward. That's a really nice way to do it. And then finally, there is a conclusion that says, this is what I want to do. Now, as I'm looking through this, I'm just going to scan back through, because now I'm blanking on if I saw this. I'm looking for some sort of a statement of how much money is going to be requested. And that, I think, if I'm not mistaken, seems to be missing. Which I think is a huge mistake. There needs to be some indication of how much money the individual or the program is seeking from the funder, and that doesn't appear to be anywhere in this letter of inquiry. So I would quite frankly, I like a lot of parts of this, as I've just said, but I would have to, if I was the Blue Ridge Foundation, go back to the letter writer and say, I don't know what exactly you're asking for, because you've given no financial indication of either a minimum or a maximum amount that would be necessary to either pilot or implement or start up this project. If we look at letter number 2, which is more concise, first of all, it's one page instead of 2. Fits very neatly on one page. It is directly addressed to the program officer or the executive director. And instead of obviously sort of stating that this is a letter of inquiry, it just starts in with sort of a story. About a year ago, individuals involved with eCity, which is Entrepreneurship, Connecting, Inspiring, and Teaching Youth, an after-school entrepreneurship education program for inner-city youth, saw that entrepreneurship was an effective hook that helped students value education and inspired them to stay in school. So instead of starting with the numbers thing, it starts with sort of an example of, this is a need, this is something that's important, and this is something that's already been happening. And then it talks about the Entrepreneurship Preparatory School, or ePrep, and how they sort of began, and the fact that they already received $117,000 in planning grants from 6 different organizations. They've, in other words, established that they have a track record of getting funding. That's a really important and effective way to go about doing that. And then talked about how they want to grow and how they're going to expand. And then they make a point that this is the big promise, and that it will be a challenge in order to create these developments, and I guess what they're leading to is fund these developments. And then they've got very quickly come to an end and say, also in this paragraph they have some organizational readiness and leadership indicators that are outlined. So you'll see that that appears in both. And then they say, we'll succeed because EPREP's founding board has solicited the support of the influential individuals and foundations in Cleveland. The funding that will come to us from the state and the federal government will not be sufficient, and therefore we're asking the Northeastern Ohio community to invest in this important educational blah, blah, blah. We would like to submit a proposal to the Morgan Foundation for $100,000 of operating support for Entrepreneurship Preparatory School. So they've been very clear about the amount that they need, but they've also been very clear that this is not all the money that they need, that there are other organizations, both government and corporate and private and foundational, that they'll be looking for additional funding from. That's a really important way to think about it, and something that was not done in the previous letter of inquiry. So what do we see in both of these? Well, we see that in both that there is some sort of a statement at the beginning that gives some either factual or anecdotal evidence that there is a need. We see in both that there is a very clear statement of the organization's readiness to receive the funding and move on to the next stage, as well as a very clear establishment that they have the leadership at that organization in order to move this forward. We see that there is an acknowledgement that there is a change that can be made and that there will be development that's a part of that. We also see some description of what the actual activities that will be funded are. What I think we see that's unique in, for example, the first one is the organization that's provided, and that the sort of more straightforward and clear statement of what's happening. Even though it's the longer of the two letters, it seems to be a little more clearly outlined. What we see in the second one, however, that's really nice is they've actually stated how much money they're looking for, and they've done a nice job of admitting, or admitting's not the right word, pointing out that they are not looking for all of their funding from this one foundation, but that they're also working with other funding agencies, both public and private, to receive the funding they need. So you have two examples of letters of inquiry. Both have strengths, both have drawbacks. Both are pretty good, though, pretty good examples to move on with. I'm hoping that your letters of inquiry will be not as long as 2 pages, but maybe closer to the 1-page mark, that they will also, however, be organized, be very clearly stated, have the crucial components, and be able to articulate what is unique about the project or program that you're asking for money to implement, and specifically identify how much money and if there is more coming from elsewhere. Okay, looking forward to seeing what you have, and I will see you tomorrow.